What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, guys, today we're going to break down the flawless and dominant performance of Sean Brady as he took on former champion Leon Rocky Edwards. We're going to get into what's next for the former champ because Rocky Edwards has fallen on some tough times. And then finally, we're going to debate, was Sean Brady's performance last night enough to jump Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's coming off a decision victory of Ian Garry, and get that rematch with Belal Muhammad? So, Nick, let's break down the fight first, because I think there was a lot of really good technical nuggets that we saw out of Sean Brady. This, to me, was the best Sean Brady that we have seen yet.
Right.
And a lot of people were saying in the comments, oh, Leon is washed. Leon. Listen, Leon was champion less than, 2 years ago?
Right.
And less than 1 year ago. And Leon, in addition to that, is only 33 years old.
Right.
So Leon's not like you caught a former champion when he's 38 or 40 years old. Leon, by age, is still in his fighting prime.
Right.
And, he's just happened to fall on some tough times. But I don't want any of that to take away from the mastery that was Sean Brady's performance last night. What were your thoughts on the way he was able to just dominate Leon?
Well, I loved the fight. And Sean Brady, when he was on his rise up, he was undefeated. He looked like the American that we could all really get behind.
World beater.
Exactly. Yeah. We're like, oh, dude looks like $1 million. His style is really good. And remember back then when he was on that undefeated tear, the 170 division was sort of run in kind of living in a grappler's era. Yeah. I know Kamaru Usman fell in love with his hands, but he was very much a grappler before he got his belt and had a lot of success with the grappling arts. So I feel like the grappling era is about to maybe have a resurgence, and it's coming from Shavkat and Sean Brady. But yes, Sean Brady, once he stumbled and lost to Bilal the first time, I was really questioning how he would bounce back after that. And he hasn't been nearly as active as he was when he was coming down into the division. But that performance we saw from him last night wasn't only getting back on track to the old Sean Brady, but it was a new and improved version of him. It looks like the strongest aspects of his game, which are a lot of, top position, grappling, wrestling dominance, he's actually improved on those in leaps and bounds. He'll never be the highest level striker that the 170 division has on the roster, but his style is so difficult to avoid and to keep on the feet. And Leon Edwards is really, really good at keeping fights on the feet. We saw him in the second fight with Kamaru have a ton of success with the takedown defense. Sean Brady, he was not giving him any of those same luxuries. He was able to keep that fight where he wanted it, at the pace he wanted it, and then, of course, all the ground time, the control time is just eating all the confidence and all the gas out of Leon Edwards. And I'll be honest with you, after about the second round, I was hoping Leon's coach would get on him and give him one of those,
famous Leon coach speeches.
Yeah, championship-style speeches. But I knew the fight was over after about the second round because Leon Edwards just looked mentally defeated. He wasn't even that drained yet in the fight. He was tired, but he just looked defeated. He wanted a way out of there. And Sean Brady's just one of those killers. He's never been to the top of the mountain. Leon has. And most times we see champions get to the top and then they lose their belt. They never make it back up because it's just so hard to climb back again. Sean Brady hasn't ever actually had those pay-per-view nights where he's making big money as the champion. He's never actually got the belt wrapped around him by Dana. So these types of things give you more hunger and more, just passion to fight and go out there and put your life on the line. Leon Edwards, he's always done that for the UFC and he's gone and done great things in his career. But once you've already done it, you just can't quite find that same fire again. And I think Sean Brady had the fire, Leon didn't. And I agree with you. Leon Edwards' performance last night, though it wasn't his best, it still wasn't horrible. He just had no answers for Sean. And that's why I don't think Sean needs to get any sort of criticism, and people do need to look at that as the new number one contender fight, because when you have a former champion, those are very rare. We talk about that all the time. He just got his hand raised, and not only did he do it, he got it done. It made it look very easily, totally controlled the fight. And when you're dealing with a few top contenders like we've got at 170, which for all intents and purposes, 170 is the most stacked division right now. It's the best top five that we've got in any division. But once you get into the top five, we're really talking about a couple of fights that have to happen and pair up certain ways. We've got these former champions like Kamaru and Leon in there and these up-and-coming guys, and they're just pairing them all together, and it seems like the changing of guard is actually happening. So, yeah, I think that I think Sean Brady coming in might have just stolen the number one contender spot from Shavkat, which we all thought was pretty much set in stone. He might have even come in as the alternate for the fight with JDM and Bilal just to weigh in. I'm not sure if he was going to do that yet, but I feel like Sean Brady's performance over a champion compared to Shavkat's performance over Ian Garry, who is a whole lot better than people were giving him credit for, but still he was never a former champion, and Shavkat looked to have had a couple of issues with that fight. I think the fans might be saying, Sean Brady deserves it more than Shavkat this time.
Well, yeah, there's certainly a case to be made for that. I want to talk about a couple of more technical aspects of the fight that Sean was able to implement, because a couple of things really stood out to me. Obviously, I thought that if the fight took place on the ground, that Sean Brady would have the better hand there. I'm not breaking any news or shattering any ground with that statement, but we all kind of knew that Sean's jiu-jitsu and his top pressure and what he's able to do there would have, would sway things in his favor if the fight could get to the ground. What I was very pleasantly surprised to see was how good he looked on the feet.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back and watch kind of some of the highlights from the fight, if you look at who popped whose head back and who landed the bigger body kicks and who was more active on the feet, it was actually Sean Brady.
Yeah.
And he's not just throwing single shots. He's throwing punches and combinations and stuff like that. So we're seeing some real improvement in his striking game, which makes that potential rematch with Bilal much more exciting. The other thing that he does really well is he uses a variety of different types of takedowns, and he uses his hands to get there, which a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, where they really fall completely flat, is they don't have a variety of takedowns, and their hands and kicks are not good enough to get them inside to get the takedowns. So really, unless they get taken down by their opponent, their jiu-jitsu is rendered worthless. So Sean has the tools now to effectively allow his jiu-jitsu to take hold. And then most importantly, when the fight did end up on the ground, he's not just trying to force a square shape into a circle hole.
Right.
He has the smooth transition of submission and advancement of position. Yeah. So he'll be in half guard. He'll transition out of that to side mount. He'll be looking for that head and arm triangle. When you're fighting that, maybe you're framing against his hip. He sees an opening under this arm. He'll switch to the Kimura. When you defend that, he'll step back over and start to look for a guillotine.
Right.
But it was just the fluidity of, they say that famous Bruce Lee saying, "Be water, my friend." Now, Bruce Lee was not a jiu-jitsu guy, but that saying gets very much adopted by any jiu-jitsu person that you hang around, especially the high-level guys. You just got to flow like water. It'll almost be like a wet blanket, and Sean does that really well. He's not rigid. He doesn't force things on the ground. He looks for submissions. He hunts them. He attacks them. When you adjust, so does he, and eventually he finds that perfect fit, and the striking on the ground really opened up those submission opportunities too.
Yeah, the ground and pound work is really great. And when you talk about those transitions, he's so good at maintaining the dominant position, and he's never giving up his back, or he's never winding up because on his back because he got too craven or too excited and tried to maybe jump on the back and goes over top. He was always riding the hips. And I love that Bruce Lee saying, but there's a 1-2 by Hickson Gracie. I guess maybe it can fit even better into the... He says that the mat is his ocean. There's something along that. I'm paraphrasing, but the mat is his ocean, and he likes to take people there to drown them. You know? And that's what it felt like for Sean Brady, because I was watching Leon Edwards, who is trying to get up, doing the right techniques. He's using the right movements. Okay, yeah, I got to sacrifice my back to get to my knees and try to, build a base and start to work my way up. Hopefully I can get to the cage. But Sean was just able to follow him every single place. If somebody looks like they're starting to, get some success and build a little bit of speed on getting back to their feet, what you have to do is transition and give them something else to worry about. So the things like switching to that Kimura grip just so he could maintain top control were really, really high-level moves. And I think Sean Brady's grappling, it might be the most difficult grappling to deal with in the division because of the top pressure and his ability to stay on the top. Now, when we saw him fight Belal Muhammad, Bilal looked really good. He got him out of there. Sean wasn't on his level. But I don't think that Sean back then was the Sean that we saw last night.
No.
Sean Brady last night was firing on all cylinders. And the most important thing is I think he got his confidence back.
Yeah.
Because when you lose for the first time, and we hear people talk about this all the time, these undefeated fighters have this sort of feeling of invincibility around them. They're like, I'm the best. Maybe I'm God's gift to earth. I'll never lose. And then they stub their toe, and then you see how they adjust from there. Well, I was worried about Sean Brady because he came in. I was like, oh, this dude's about to make a serious tear to the top. Bilal shows us that he's better than advertised, and people maybe weren't putting respect on his name. But I was eager to see how Sean would come back, and he came back, and I think he made the adjustments. Like you said, the work on the feet looked really good. His striking is never going to be the best, but it's definitely good enough to implement his game plan and implement his style where he knows he has the best advantage to win the fight. So I think Sean Brady, as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, training the hands into the shots, work the cage work, chain wrestling, so you can make sure that you're getting these guys to the ground, because Leon Edwards might have been easier to get to the ground than Belal Muhammad is going to be to get to the ground. And while Leon Edwards is a better striker than both of these guys, I believe that Belal Muhammad will still have a slight advantage on the feet and with the speed on the feet over Sean Brady when they do inevitably fight again. So that one to me will be a very interesting fight, and it could end up being one of those ones where it's two guys who are so good at wrestling they negate each other and we get a striking contest. And at that point, maybe Bilal would have an advantage once again because his striking is still improving. But there's so many wrinkles to it, and at this point, 170's in this great situation where they've got so many top contenders, and I don't think the fans would be upset about any of them.
No.
Now, it's sort of, what does the UFC want to do from here, right? So we've got some guys, and look, they just lost Alex Pereira. He was the most marketable active champ on the roster, right? They just lost him.
As a champ.
As a champ. No, he's very much still in the game. But as a champ, he's gone. And I just start to wonder if the UFC will put any sort of favoritism into their matchmaking, or if they're just going to go based off of merit. JDM is obviously getting the title shot. I believe Sean Brady did enough to not have to fight again for his title shot, but you never know what's going to happen with JDM and Bilal. They might have a razor-thin fight that leads to a rematch, and now you've got to fight again. So I'm looking at the division, and it just feels to me like Sean Brady might have to do one more fight, but that if he does, I believe Shavkat will also have to do one more fight. But I also don't think that the UFC is going to put them together. I think there's something to be said for them fighting later. And remember, we were talking about it earlier. Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, all these guys are sort of moving their way out of the top five, and these new guys are moving in. So I could see, a Joaquin Buckley getting matched with one of those veterans, one of those former champs. I could see Shavkat getting matched in with one of those guys. And I think they're going to do that to try to build these guys' names off of these champions. Easier fights said than done, but I think these next stable of 170 fighters are going to be the ones that get these striking guys, these former champions out, and I believe the grappling era for 170 has officially begun, and Bilal's leading the charge, but man, Sean Brady's coming in hot.
Yeah, I would agree with you, with the exception of Joaquin Buckley and JDM. I think those guys are both striking heavy guys that I think can cause some fits for the guys at the top of the division, but definitely with Bilal, Shavkat, and Sean Brady. Yeah. So let's talk about whether or not Sean Brady's performance last night allowed him to leapfrog Shavkat Rakhmonov for the next title shot. So, I mean, we know that JDM and Bilal are going to get paired up in just over a month or so from now. Yeah. That's going to be a great fight. On paper, there's a lot of ways, and we'll break this down as the fight gets closer, that JDM could actually get the jump. His takedown defense is pretty good. And so I think it's going to depend on what happens in the fight. So here's the thing. Let's look at just the win itself.
Okay.
The win over a decision victory over Ian Machado Garry is not as impressive as dominating and choking out the former champion in Leon Rocky Edwards.
Agreed.
So that goes to the favor of Sean Brady over Shavkat Rakhmonov when you're talking about who gets the nod next.
Right.
Now, almost 100% finish rate with 0 losses, and he also does not have a loss against the current champion in Bilal. That favors Shavkat a little bit. You have to also remember that Bilal did beat Sean Brady before, and he dominated him and he finished him. And so for a guy, especially that doesn't finish a lot of people, to get a finish over somebody, that holds weight too. So I think it's going to come down to what the UFC deems as more impressive.
Right.
In addition to that, it's going to come down to what happens and who wins the JDM versus Bilal fight.
Yeah.
because then let's say JDM is able to get in there and finish Belal. His hands are just too good, and Belal can't get him to the ground. He gets the knockout. Maybe they think, okay, we got this really young, exciting striker, and we got Sean Brady, who's a really young, exciting grappler. Let's get them in there and do the thing, and then let Shavkat work it out with maybe an Usman or somebody like that.
Right.
Who knows? But to me, if we're just talking about if we wiped away the loss, and I know you can't do that, but if we wiped away the loss that Sean Brady suffered at the hands of Belal, I would say 100%, no shadow of a doubt, Sean Brady is more deserving of the title shot than Shavkat Rakhmonov at this current moment. The fact that Shavkat's undefeated, the fact that he's got almost 100% finish ratio, and he doesn't have that L against the current champion does make a difference. So for those reasons, I think it's probably going to go to Shavkat just because they want that parity there. They want that. I think the UFC sees Shavkat as a star, and I think they're starting to broaden their horizons a little bit for what a marketable star is.
Right.
It used to be if you're an English speaker and you're brash, you're a Conor McGregor.
Marketable in America.
Exactly. You're a Brock Lesnar, somebody like that. You're a star, Ronda Rousey. But we just, up until very recently, a couple weeks ago, our big, and he might even still be, our biggest star in the sport did not speak a lick of English, and that was Alex Pereira.
Right.
So I think the UFC is starting to be, it's becoming every day more and more an international sport, and the stars are becoming more and more international, and the necessity to speak English and stuff like that is becoming less and less.
Right. They're building their fan bases in their territory.
Exactly right. So I think that they do see Shavkat as a star, and that was kind of the pushback that a lot of people gave. Well, Shavkat doesn't speak English, and I don't know if he really has that star power. First of all, I don't speak any of the languages that Shavkat Rakhmonov. I speak English, and I get by with a very un poco de español. But it's I'm a huge Shavkat fan because of what he does in the cage and because of how he carries himself outside of the cage. So I think that the marketability for somebody like Shavkat is actually quite big, and I think the UFC would actually like to see him as a champ. So I think Brady's going to have to do one more. Maybe it's Usman. Maybe it's somebody else.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Joaquin Buckley. Maybe they throw him in there with Buckley, and then that person is the winner of that is the number one contender after Shavkat gets his fight. But who knows, man? 170 is up in the air.
Yeah, they've got a great problem because they've got so many people that all could sit in a number one contenders fight or even in a title fight and nobody would bat an eye. But yeah, I think that Shavkat Rakhmonov is a very marketable fighter, even though he's not a star in America yet and he doesn't have the language to speak English to the fans. The sport is growing all over the world, and in his region it's growing big. But I think there's something to be said for the stoicism, right? There's the UFC's marketing team is very good at finding what you're best at or your best attributes and then highlighting those. Shavkat's never going to be the brash, Irish speaker on the microphone. He's never going to be Conor McGregor, but he'll look at you. When I was in Vegas out there at the same time when he was with his team, they're walking in a single file line. Like, they're an intimidating bunch. You can sell that all day long, no problem. Sean Brady, he's an intimidating looking dude, but he also speaks American. And I would say as far as...
He speaks American?
Yeah, he speaks really good American. Really good.
Spoken like a true American.
True American, right in the heart of Texas. No, Sean Brady definitely looks like the kind of guy that could be marketable, especially in America. But I would say that the most marketable guy in the division for the UFC right now is Jack Della Maddalena.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think it's because of his style. I think, it's not because he's some looker. He's not the most handsome guy in the world or anything, but he's
had that nose broken a time or two.
Oh, yeah. His profile is something to look at.
The side profile of JDM is
something, man.
It's something to see.
Oh, yeah. It looks like a skull. But he is the most marketable style-wise. I think that Bilal's going to have his hands full because JDM's so fast, his takedown defense is so good. And honestly, as far as marketing goes, I just feel like that's a home run for the UFC. They love their grapplers. They love their fighters. And the thing they love the most is having the best fighters on the planet and making the best fights possible. But everybody knows there is a human bias to strikers versus grapplers. We can't help it. The casual in all of us, even if we see great grappling, we're like, it's a great fight, love it, want to see more of that, but I'd love to see him stand up for the next round. Everybody just wants to see a little bit of that.
Last night's fight was great. It was very entertaining. it wasn't the BMF title fight between Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway.
Exactly.
Let's just put it that way.
Exactly. And we love both. But I do think that as far as what the UFC is going to want to do next, and I think they kind of indicated this by giving JDM the title fight, he totally deserved it, but they felt a hunch like, okay, let's run with this. Stylistically, it's a good matchup for Bilal. It's probably a pretty close fight. And if he's able to win, he's got Murderer's Row waiting for him.
Yeah.
But this is a good guy I think we could probably get some hype around because of his fighting style. I mean, look at the rise that Alex Pereira had. And I'm not saying JDM is anything like Alex, but he has great hands. He really knows how to get the fights done with his hands. And he's an exciting guy. And anytime you got somebody that can put the lights out of their opponents, you have somebody that the UFC can build something off of. Yeah. And I just think JDM is going to be a very difficult matchup for Bilal, but it's the right matchup. And while we have Shavkat, who has looked like this absolute world beater and the #1 170 fighter in the world, just sitting in the division, not fighting for a title, I get that might look a little crazy, but I don't think that him fighting one more time would be bad for the division because it's so stacked right now. And we always go off of recency bias. What have you done for me lately? Shavkat had a good fight against Ian Garry. He won. But that was a little while ago. And I know he's been dealing with some injuries. I think it's a foot or something like that. So he had to, back off for the second half of last year and the beginning of this year. But I think that Shavkat can actually come in and ruffle some feathers and really make some things interesting. But this is just the way the UFC sees this division going forward. I think they like Bilal. I don't think they have anything wrong with him, but I think they have their sights on JDM potentially bringing a very electric style to the title at 170.
Yeah, I think the tide is changing a little bit on Bilal. But before we wrap, people don't hate him as much as they used to, and there's really no reason to hate Bilal. He's a great, complete mixed martial artist. He doesn't finish people, but who cares?
Right. He's one of those guys that he got made fun of so much for so long that people are like, all right, let's lighten up. He's not that bad. We actually kind of like him. He's a champ. He's really good. He takes the jokes well. So, all right, if it doesn't stick, then you just kind of stop throwing stuff on the wall, right?
And that's the thing. He handles it well.
Right.
If you get offended by the shit talking, then people tend to keep piling on you. Mm-hmm. But Bilal actually kind of plays into it a little bit. Right. And I think once you realize that he's a little bit light and he can deal with the self-deprecating humor. Yeah. He's good. But I want to finish up just briefly touching on a little bit of Leon Edwards and what's next for Rocky, the former champ.
So Rocky road ahead, huh?
Yeah, Rocky road for Rocky. And guys, before we finish up this conversation, just want to say thank you to all of you who have supported this channel by way of subscribing to the channel. We just surpassed 10,000 subs, and seemingly almost 2 or 3 days later, we surpassed 11,000. Thank you so much. We're now on a mission to 25,000 subscribers, and if you're enjoying our content, please hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it helps us out tremendously.
Let's go. Road to 25K.
Here's the thing. He's 33.
Yeah.
It's not like Leon Edwards is, 38, 39, 40 years old where he could say, you know what? I was the champ. I've had a few losses in a row. Right. It's time to call it a day. I'm going to walk out a millionaire and be done. And maybe I'll commentate and work on the UFC side in Europe.
Sky Sports. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But the issue with Leon is what do you do with a fighter who's so young? Because if you just look at age-wise, he's still in his fighting prime. Right. Leon's not the kind of fighter that fought like Tony Ferguson or anything like that. He hasn't, or Justin Gaethje, he hasn't just been demolished in fights. So you would think that he's got some legs on him. The problem is 170, as far as becoming a champ or a #1 contender, is buttoned up and done for him. That's no longer gonna be a reality. Right. You got Shavkat, you got Brady, you got Joaquin, you got JDM.
Even if he goes on a winning streak, there's a good chance he just doesn't get a title shot.
Carlos Prates coming
up. Let's go.
So it just, they're going to try to feed, but when you have a former champion, you can build the stars of tomorrow off of them. Right. So does Leon want to be a gatekeeper for the future stars? Right. And so he really only has two options, right? The first option is be a gatekeeper for 170 and, fight the Carlos Prateses of the world, fight the Joaquin Buckleys, and maybe you go 500 and you win one, you lose one, you win two, you lose two. Who knows? Right. But the only other option is a weight class change. Yeah. Now, here's the tricky part of that. He's not a 150 a 145 or going to 155 or a 135 or going to 145, he's at a weight class where it's 15 pounds
Either
down
direction.
or 15 pounds up.
Right.
15 pounds up he's simply too small.
Yeah.
I mean, Sean Brady Sean's shorter than him, but Sean looked double as wide as he did last night. Now, do I think that Leon could make 55? I think he probably could. Like, looking at him last night, he didn't look completely leaned out, like where you can see every ab in his abdomen and all of that. Like, he's in shape. I'm not saying he's out of shape, but I think that if he adjusted some things, that 155 might be a possibility. Now, it would be difficult, but I don't remember Leon ever really having trouble making weight or anything like that at 170. He's never missed weight or, been in discussion like, oh, Leon's on the edge, like we might need to get a backup in here. No, he's always made weight, and he's never really looked total. You see people at the press conference, 145 Conor McGregor comes to mind.
Awful.
Looks like a skeleton, but still talking mess to his opponents. But that's a trait that only Conor possesses. But Leon has never looked completely sucked out to me. Like, I think Leon could make 155 if he absolutely had to. And really, that's his only other option. It's gatekeeper at 170, fresh coat of paint in a new weight class, or call it a career. I mean, that's really where Leon Edwards is right now.
Well, yeah, and it's tough because I don't think Leon should stop fighting. He's clearly showed that even though he can't beat Sean Brady, he belongs in the cage with him. So that shows you he's in the top 10 best fighters alive still. But it is a tough road because you're never going to get back to the title, even if you go on probably a 2 or 3 fight win streak. It's just probably not in the cards. And like you said, 185, they're just simply too big. And a couple of years ago, when he first got his belt, maybe about 3 years ago, I was like, I think Leon is the perfect size for 170.
Yeah.
But a lot changes in this sport. And in 2 or 3 years, now the frame for a 170, the ideal frame, is a Shavkat. And I've seen him in person, and that's a big dude. He's
enormous, right?
And so when you see a guy like Leon Edwards, who now looks small for the division when he didn't look small for it 2 years ago, and then you look at 155, Islam's a pretty big dude. Remember, Jalen Turner just retired, but he's 6'3" and cuts to 155.
Yeah.
So Leon isn't quite that tall. He wouldn't have to get quite as thin as a Jalen Turner.
And he doesn't have a whole lot more muscle than Jalen has. Like a little bit, but not an insane amount.
Yeah, he's a naturally pretty lean guy.
Yeah.
So that would, if he's going to change weight classes, it has to be 55. I don't want to see him go to 185. It's just too big.
No, he would look like a child fighting in an adult division.
Right. Which is crazy because Khamzat was in this division not that long ago.
Those boys are huge.
Yeah.
Those 180, like Dricus Duplessis when he's
Caio Bahallo.
Yeah, those guys, those are some big boys.
Yeah. So I think that Leon Edwards probably will sit at 170. I think he'll have some fun fights. But remember this, Jeremy Stevens was fighting in BKFC. I think he just fought Eddie Alvarez a few months ago. Turns out that was the last fight on his contract. He wanted to jump back into UFC. He got back in the testing pool. Now he's in the UFC. He's going to be fighting in a couple of months. Jorge Masvidal hasn't fought in the UFC in quite a while, but him and Leon had a whole 3-piece in a soda backstage conflict issue.
They still have to settle that.
They need to settle that.
Yeah.
I think that's a fight that needs to happen, and Jorge Masvidal would love to insert himself back into a top 5 fight at 170, even though he's probably got no chance at winning it. And Leon Edwards probably wants to make him pay for whatever happened backstage.
Punching him in the face.
Exactly. For serving him a 3-piece he didn't even order. He didn't even want it. So, yeah, I think that let's have some fun. Leon's not the guy like Conor or Nate Diaz or Alex Pereira where they can exclusively have fun and people don't care. But that's a fight that has a storyline. And if there's no more truly meaningful fights for Leon, then let's have some fun. Bring Jorge Masvidal, a legend, back into the game and let those guys mix it up.
I actually really like Masvidal versus Leon at 170. Leon needs a win. He's going to get it against Jorge. Obviously, Jorge Masvidal is a dangerous fighter. He was at the top, and he's been doing this for forever.
Yeah.
Like, most people don't realize how long Jorge Masvidal has been in the fight game.
Since a teenager.
But Jorge Masvidal is not really in the fight game right now. I mean, he's doing his little promoting, and he's got his stuff going on in Miami, but he's not training to the level Leon Edwards is. So it's a fun fight. Everybody would probably enjoy watching it.
Right.
And it's a fight where I say there's a 90% chance Leon tunes him up.
Right. Well, remember, Nate Diaz was scheduled to fight Khamzat Chimaev. Kevin Holland came in, shout out Kevin, saved the day and made it a more realistic, reasonable fight. But I mean, if they're willing to make Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev, especially after seeing where their careers have gone since then, losing to Jake Paul, probably being the next middleweight champion. I think that there's room to make a fight for Jorge Masvidal and Leon Edwards. That seems a little bit closer.
I agree.